Welcome everyone to our Spring 2022 series of OTF Connects webinars entitled Supporting Teacher Efficacy and Student Engagement. My name is Peter Beans and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's session with Michael Frankfort, entitled Building Nature Connections, How to Organize an Eco-Fair at Your School. Before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are gathered in the traditional territories of various Indigenous peoples, and we further recognize our duty to support the achievement of the calls to actions stemming from the recommendations of the Truth in Canada. So many of you have already met Michael. He's been very active here. Michael Frankfort. He's one of the current co-chairs of the Science Teachers Association of Ontario, with the acronym is STAO. On the Elementary Curriculum Committee. He's also been an elementary teacher for over 20 years. His foci are student inquiry, social justice pedagogy, science and technology engagement, mathematics, robotics, animation, and STEM/STEAM. Michael is also involved in a variety of volunteer committees and events that support community festivals, events, and initiatives. So let's turn it over to Michael. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. And Peter, thank you so much for that great introduction. It's great to see a lot of people joining us after school time. So really wonderful to have you join us here. You're going to see that my face is kind of moving around a little bit. I got a few devices on. So I am presenting here, and we've got the chat on another, and I've got stuff going on another computer here. So I'm just going to share my screen with everyone, and then we're going to get started. And here we go. And the one thing, just to repeat what Peter had mentioned before, was feel free to put questions or comments in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself. We're going to make it very casual. And really, at the end of the day here, I'm not here to share with you a specific lesson plan or a specific, way of doing something. I'm here to share some of the successes that I've had with my colleagues, with a few schools that I've worked at, and with students of all ages that I worked at, and some ideas about how you can engage students in making connections with nature, but not just with nature as in going out hiking or going out to an environmental education center, but even just exploring nature in your own backyard and really having that empowerment piece. So yeah, and there's going to be a few times where I'm going to hope that you can do some interacting with us. Got a few video clips for you. Now, Peter will put that link into the chat for everybody. This is a bit.ly to the presentation. You should have access to it, and you can look at it anytime. The links are all embedded in there as well, and I hope that it works for everybody else. Peter, do you have a copy of that? Are you able to put it in the chat for everybody? Yep, that'd be great. So as Peter said, Michael Frankfort, currently I'm a co-chair of the Elementary Curriculum Committee with the Science Teachers Association, and I'm also an elementary teacher in the York Region District School Board. So where this came from is really interesting. So about 6 years ago or so, there was an idea to do some type of eco-fair at a school that I was working at in the Markham area. And, typically, traditionally, I guess, you sort of think about doing science fairs, it's about, doing a volcano, right? Or, going home and working with parents on something and having some type of showcase. So we wanted to engage students in a different way of doing science fair type stuff, but to do it in a way that would be their own ideas, would be engaging, and would sort of connect with the community around them. And so it's kind of a what came first, the chicken or the egg scenario, whereby the eco fair happened, and simultaneous, myself and another colleague named Teresa Wong started working on a resource, and STAO approached us, and we created the resource. So the resource is there for you, and you can actually go on to that website. And if Peter, if you have a chance, you can put it in the chat. And you'll see that a lot of the links and stuff and video and resources are there. The resources are available to download as a Word document, so you can actually modify as you go. So the creation of this resource and then the creation of this presentation webinar workshop sort of stemmed from working with students. Now, even though that the documentation that you see says grade 8 on it, because that was the grade of students that I was working with at the time. And we connected it with the curriculum unit on water systems, life systems unit. Earth and space unit, life systems is cells. You can adapt this for almost any grade, and I've used it with almost any grade at school. Mostly I've done work with grades 4, 5 up to grade 8, but again, you'll be able to see where it kind of moves with it. So I'm going to show you a clip, one of the clips of the intro here, and I'd like you to have a look. And if anybody has any challenges with hearing, please let us know. Here we go. Oops, we'll go back here. That didn't work. I'll play it for you.
Welcome to Experience Sustainability, a cross-curricular project for grade 8. In this project, the students will explore, research, and essentially experience sustainability with a focus on water in their local and global community. Because this project builds upon students' prior knowledge, it's suggested that you may want to do this project at the later part of the school year. In this project, the students will bring awareness or take action on an environmental water issue, and in doing so will gain a deeper understanding about the issue, about themselves, and their responsibility to be stewards of the environment.
So just to let you know, all the things that you saw in that video, those were student projects, every single one of them. And they were taken at one of the eco fairs that we had done. So this is what I would like to cover over the course of today. And I apologize, things are kind of jumping in and out there. I'm trying to get rid of that bar down below. Let's see if I can move it away. I don't think I can. Oh, wait. Can I get rid of it? I can't get rid of it completely. Anyways, we'll just leave it there for now, and I'll worry about it after. So what I'd like to do today is talk about some of these things where we're looking at cross-curricular, cross-strand stuff. And I think one of the really important things about science, environmental education, but for that matter, any kind of academic subject, is you want to have students to act and think. And in this case, act and think like scientists and researchers, but also having the idea and being mindful that students need to see themselves and to see representation and diversity in what they're doing. And they also need to feel engaged so that the issues that they're researching have an impact on them. We're building on students' prior knowledge. We're looking at taking action on a certain type of environmental issue, gaining some deeper understanding about the issue, about themselves and about the responsibility of being stewards of the environment. Student voice is important in this kind of project because they get to choose their own topic. Hands-on learning is important, and a possible extension of something like this could be some type of interactive eco-fair. Now, I did these when we were not in, this was before March 2020. So, if you were doing something like that in the last couple of years, being mindful that we might have to have sort of virtual components to it as well, and different ways of engaging. So that's the overview of what kind of I'd like to talk about today. And let's go into the next part. While we're going through this webinar, I want you to think about these 5 questions. And these are very similar to questions that I would ask students. So how do human activities impact the environment? Because this resource connected with grade 8, the question is, what does it mean to have access to water or clean water? A very general question of what is sustainability? What can we do as citizens of the planet, and what can we change? So you can see that it's kind of overreaching themes a little bit. It's not necessarily focused, necessarily on one strand. So keep those ideas in mind as we go through. And the big ideas that we can look at is the local and global sustainability. That idea that if you want to interact with nature, it doesn't have to be, you have to go to a forest. You can interact with nature just in your own backyard. What are the impacts of technologies and innovation? What are the implications from a social, political, economical, and environmental perspective? And what are the issues that relate to environmental sustainability? So I'm going to show you another clip, and these clips are available right, through the STAO website, through that link that Peter posted, and it's going to sort of give you a bit of an overview. It's going to repeat some of the stuff that I've mentioned, and you'll hear my colleague Teresa also speaking in some of these videos. So just want to make sure there aren't any questions yet. I'm looking through the chat. I think we're okay. I'm going to play the video for you. Here we go.
In the first lesson of this project, students are exposed to a variety of media texts related to environmental sustainability and human impact. The idea here is to ignite the students' interest of environmental issues and to brainstorm some big ideas for their summative project. The students will be involved in determining some thick and open questions with exposure to these media texts. Some suggested resources are included in lesson 1 of this project. However, the teacher is encouraged to add any other relevant material to this lesson.
So I think what you've seen there is some, oh, here it goes again. There we go. Okay. So I think what you've seen there was some images from movies such as, An Inconvenient Truth documentary, saw the Aaron Brockovich, had some other stuff. So an idea here, obviously, you know your own students, you know their learning styles, you know sort of how your classroom works and what that learning environment is in terms of including the students in the conversation and providing equitable comfortability and whatnot in conversations. So one suggestion with your students is to engage them in some type of media text. So, it could be a picture book, it could be maybe a novel that you're reading, it could be an article in the newspaper, it could be a video, it could be a whole bunch of stuff. And within the resource that I have, there's a bunch of different ideas. One of them that I tend to use with junior, intermediate, and even if you were to do this with high school students, is this clip from George Stroumboulopoulos from The Hour. Now, I'm sure most of us are aware of George Stroumboulopoulos. Doesn't have the show anymore. But I'm just curious, have any of you ever heard about James Lovelock before? And feel free to throw an answer in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself. Have any ever heard of this individual named James Lovelock before? I know that you can see the little blurb that's coming up here. There, yes, Denise, exactly. Yes, the Gaia Theory. Yes. And it's really interesting. Now, one of the things that I tell my students before I play the clip, and we're going to play the whole clip together, is, a lot of times students feel that when a teacher shows a video, that video is, the facts, that is the truth, that is everything. And so what I tell my students is, I want to know your opinion on this. I want to know what you think. You're allowed to disagree, right? There's no right or wrong answer. And as going through the video, these are the kind of questions that I usually prepare. I sometimes have a bit more, a bit less, and I usually give them some type of worksheet. But here are some questions that I want you to think about right now. So here are 6 questions. So how does climate change relate to natural disasters? What's the difference and similarities between the words weather and climate? How have living organisms been affected by climate change? What does the scientific community think about climate change? What does doomsday pending mean to you? And what is your opinion on James Lovelock's Gaia Theory? So these are very open-ended questions. And I do this on purpose because I'm not looking for what the right answer is. On a side note, in some communities that I've worked in, there was a high population of ELL students. So knowing that their first language wasn't English, I would also have this available in a language that is comfortable for them. As well, there is a possibility, of course, that you'll have students which have different types of learning challenges. And so I make the document available maybe in a Google Doc of some kind so they can type it in and they can use their devices. But again, the big idea here is making them feel comfortable in potentially a clip that has some information that may be uncomfortable to hear. A lot of times, especially at the beginning of the school year, when I talk to my students, going to play a video, they always say, "Oh, you're going to play Bill Nye." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to play Bill Nye." "Oh, everybody plays Bill Nye." I don't do that often. I want them to think about stuff. So the clip's about 10 minutes long. I'm going to mute myself. And I want you to listen to what's being said and jot some stuff down potentially on your end, or if you want to throw some stuff into the chat a little bit, and let's discuss a little bit. And thank you to Peter for posting the questions in there. Does anybody have any questions before I start the video? I want to make sure we're all good on what we're going to do right now. Everybody good to go? I'm going to take that as a yes. All right, here we go.
You know, we've all heard that global warming is destroying the environment, right? And that if we don't do something about it quickly, we're facing potential disaster. Well, that's the cheery version of the story. Wait till you hear what James Lovelock has to say. Lovelock is what you call an independent scientist. Some would say a maverick. He actually works in a lab that used to be a barn in Cornwall, England, and for years, he's been sounding the alarm on climate change. Back in the 60s, Lovelock started preaching what is now called the Gaia Theory, named after Gaia, Greek goddess of Earth. Basically, he says the Earth is one giant interdependent living system that regulates itself. It keeps chemical levels, temperature, and other conditions optimal to keep life going. And then we, humans, come into the picture. We cut down the trees, we spew out pollutants, and the system is thrown completely out of whack. Lovelock says, look, we can't undo the damage we've done, and by the end of this century, he predicts that many places on Earth will be unlivable, and most of the human race will be wiped out. So don't waste your time trying to reverse climate change, he said. Instead, focus on finding ways to survive the inevitable ahead. He lays it all out in his new book called The Vanishing Face of Gaia. Everybody, please say hello to James Lovelock. It's such a fascinating theory that you have, but before we get into all the details of it, I mean, tell me, how did you come up with the theory of Gaia?
Oh, well, it originated at the Jet Propulsion Labs in California a long time ago, 1965. But the name Gaia was given to me by a famous author. You probably know of him, Bill Golding. Lord of the Flies, that's right, and a whole series of other books. And I think he even got a Nobel Prize for Literature in the end. Yes.
So he just said, hey, you should call it. Like, how did that happen?
Well, you see, he was originally trained as a physicist. Most people don't know that, but he was. And he and I lived in the same small village in England. There's only 400 people there. And we used to chat in the village pub. And he was interested in what I was doing over there in California. And when I told him I got this idea that the whole planet was looked after itself, almost in a way alive, he said, well, you better give it a proper name. And I suggest you call it Gaia. And we went on talking for 20 minutes because I thought he meant G-Y-R-E, right, one of these great self-regulating worlds. He said, no, I mean Gaia, the Greek goddess. The goddess of the earth.
Now, did that idea come up early in the pub conversation or much later, when we have different, when things have changed?
Well, that'll be telling.
So, you're right. So the idea of the world that regulates itself, the planet that regulates itself, is one thing. But now we're at this point, and one thing we had talked about is you say it's too late. Like, we just need to deal with the inevitability. Just for people who perhaps haven't wrapped their head around it, what is your theory that says we're done?
It's not so much a theory, it's coming from observations of what's happening around the Earth. And it's always important. Observations are much more important than theories. We have plenty of theories. No, the Earth's been looking after itself for quite a while in what's called the interglacial, the kind of warm period we're in at the moment. But in the last few years, it started warming up. And this is a sign that it's moving away from the current state it's in to, it exists in stable states, either cold, middling, or very hot. And it looks as if it's going to the very hot period. And it's been there many times before.
And so, how long does it take to get to the place where we can no longer... Like, are you saying that... You're not saying the entire human race will be wiped out, but you're saying
Heavens,
that...
No.
But a significant number. You're not talking about a party here.
I'm afraid so. As many as 7 out of 8 are likely to be wiped out, yes.
Is it certain parts of the globe that are going to be harder hit than others?
Very much so, and Canada is unusually favoured. This is the sort of place, when it happened before 55 million years ago, life not only survived, but things moved here to get away from the heat. And that's likely to happen again. But this time it'll be people moving. And I think the main problem for Canada will be how to handle the influx of people from outside the world and when to be able to say, no, we've got enough now. If we take any more, we can't feed you.
You know, the observation can sort of you can monitor what's happening to the environment. You could take a look at, melting, peaks of ice, I guess, around the world. But how do you prove that it is more than that? Like, how do you say that this is what happened 55 million years ago? How would you get to that place?
Well, the evidence for 55 million years ago comes from record of sediments and looking back over the evidence, and it's pretty solid. It's like, they use the ice cores from Greenland or Antarctica, and you can tell what the temperature and the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere was any time up to 1 million years ago, indeed a lot longer than that. And it's that sort of evidence that is pointing to the changes that are taking place now as rather like changes that have happened in the past that are similar.
Is this something that, with your observation, you can say is because of humans? That's one of the big debates about climate change, is humans are causing this. Is this just an inevitability?
The best way to look at it is, think of yourself as somebody walking in a forest somewhere, and you pick up a gun, and you accidentally pull the trigger and it goes off and does some damage. You didn't intend to do that. You kind of pulled the trigger by accident, and that's what we've done. We pulled a trigger on the system, and the system is now moving into another state.
So let's say, like, in centuries and centuries from now, this could have happened anyway, but we've just kickstarted the process.
Exactly.
Wow. So that means, then, that we should have a really good time, shouldn't we?
Well, it won't be all bad. No. There'll be some exciting moments, I think.
For sure. Is it reversible?
No, it isn't. That's the crux of it. I think a lot of people around the world, particularly politicians, the people who had the Kyoto meeting, the Bali meeting, they think that if we're good and we stop burning fuels and everything, it'll all go back to where it was. It won't.
Can we slow
Once it started moving, you can't stop it.
Can we slow it down?
I wouldn't say we can't, but I don't think we can.
I think politicians, and I think a lot of scientists who are tied to certain institutions are probably in a position where they can't come out and say what you can say, because can you imagine a politician saying, listen, we got about 100 years and it's a mess. So do you know that, is that a good thing or a bad thing that the community can't say that, or at least side with you?
I agree with you, absolutely. It's not only politicians, the scientists can't, because most scientists are employees of universities or governments and things, and their next round of grant funding depends on saying the right thing. If they start saying alarming things like that, they're likely to be in trouble. So there's a great limitation on everybody on what they can say freely. And yes, it's a very powerful influence.
Who funds you that allows you to do this?
I fund myself by writing books and by inventing things.
Okay, without giving away the patent, obviously, what's the thing you've invented that we need, that's coming down the pipe, that we're going to be very excited about?
Oh, well, I mean, it was invented a long time ago as a thing called the electron capture detector. It's kind of provided the data that made Rachel Carson's story true, that, the world was getting damaged by pesticides and things. And it's been around a long time. I don't own the patent for that. The US government took it.
Nice. Is that
without my permission?
Is it really? Do you find people in governments that are willing to listen to you and take what you say seriously? Because obviously what you say, there are a lot of people in the scientific community who might agree with you, but a lot of people say no. They disagree. Do you find people in government that can agree with you?
Very much so, yes. I think politicians have a lousy job. I mean, somebody said it's the art of the possible is politics. Yeah. And no, I think they're always willing to listen, but whether they can do anything is another matter.
In terms of energy, so people are talking about how do you find renewable energy sources, wind power, solar power, whatever. For you, do you look at it and say, what's now, understanding that it is over anyway, is there a place we should be focusing our attention on?
Well, it's a matter of horses for courses. If you live in Iceland, you've got all the energy you need from hot rocks and stuff, so why bother with nuclear or anything else? If you live in Britain, you haven't any option. It's an overcrowded little island. You've either got the choice of burning fossil fuel coal or of going nuclear. Well, I think it's much better to go nuclear for Britain. Renewables are a joke. I mean, they will not supply anywhere near enough energy at all. But they're very, very good for business. You can make a lot of money going into renewable energy.
So how do you... So the environmentalists don't like you very much, do they?
No.
Is there a chance you're wrong in your mind?
Of course there is. I'm a scientist, and you can never be certain about anything. Mm-hmm. And one had better really realise that. None of us can be certain.
So I figured that you must have really believed in what you're saying because you're going to space, and I thought maybe you were going to try to colonize. Are you on the Richard Branson flight? Is that apparently you're on that flight?
Yeah, it's the ultimate upgrade, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding. How did you get on the Richard Branson flight?
Well, I guess Sir Richard Branson read some of my books and seemed to like what he heard, and he sent me an email saying, would I like to have a free ride up into space? So I said, you bet.
Did he try to name something? Did he try to take your name, the Gaia Theory, or something, use Gaia to launch a product or something?
I think he did, and I did email him beforehand saying, no, that was biofuels.
Biofuels.
And I don't think they're a good idea at all. And I said, no objection to his using biofuels, but don't go and tie Gaia to it, because it isn't a Gaian idea.
It's amazing. You got to read this book. It's called The Vanishing Face of Gaia. James Lovelock, everyone. Thanks for coming in. James Lovelock. All right, we'll be right back.
So, interesting. And so at this point in time, I try to ask my students, obviously, those questions that I had asked you originally. And I'll throw them back on the screen again here. Let me get through this again. There we go. But I also ask my students, what did you think of the video? Like, do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you want there? Now I'm going to jump on what Peter posted in the chat. Now, if you can see renewables, Peter, you posted renewable, not a joke. Solar power has come a long way since the interview. Agree, right? And do you want to jump in on this, just out of curiosity?
In terms of cost as well,
Yeah.
as an example, I'm building up a motorhome right now. I bought an old Sprinter van. I'm converting to a motorhome, and I have the solar panels already. But solar panels now are about $100 per 100 watts, so about $1 a watt.
Okay.
Which is not bad at all. The battery technology has come a long way. So now they have lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are really, really good technology. Even the Teslas are going to be changing to this lithium iron phosphate. And they're not cheap. It cost me about $700 for every 100 amp hours, and I ordered 3 of them. So I got about $2,100 worth of batteries.
Wow.
But relatively speaking, I'll be able to be self-sustainable on the road. I will not have to plug in, as long as I'm careful with my power. But that's enough for a fridge, a microwave oven, a hot plate, run all of our lights, etc. Right?
Plugging your phones in, charging them.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And you should be in pretty good shape. That's enough power if you're careful with it, right?
See, and that's really cool because this is the kind of conversations I start having with students, like, well, what do you think about that? And so how could you disprove that? Or how could you think about it in a different way? And something like you just said is that, well, let's talk about solar power. And obviously, this interview was done a while ago. It wasn't done in the last few years. So thanks for sharing, Peter. That was awesome. Anybody else want to jump in with any thoughts about the video themselves? Anything struck you as interesting? I'll go over the questions. One of the things that I found really interesting with my students is some of them would say, we're all doomed. Did that scientist, Mr. Frankfort, just say we're all doomed? I said, yeah, but scientists are supposed to not talk like that. I go, okay, so do you agree? Do you disagree? So it engaged them in that conversation. And what I like about it is I don't usually give my opinion about James Lovelock. I like to say, this is one person's opinion. And then there are lots of different things that you can go with it. So I'll show you on the next couple slides. Here are some actual student responses. I've kind of edited them together a little bit, but if you notice on this one, the first one talking about climate change relating to natural disasters, there's conversation about melting ice caps, relation between rising sea levels and tsunamis, talking about tornadoes and hurricanes, melting ice causing avalanches, as well as landslides, and sort of a conversation of, does climate change have an effect? And this is something that a lot of us can look at in the course of a year and go, wow, there's been some really big natural disasters, and is the question because the climate is changing? Is it a question of pollution? Is it a question of overpopulation? So what are the reasons for it? Some of the differences between weather and climate, again, student answers sort of talking about atmosphere, large scale. One of the things that I liked here is the student wrote down, overall, it's more of a matter of wordplay or doublespeak rather than scientific stuff. So again, pulling in that political piece, right, that economical piece into the conversation. Rolando, you wrote down in the chat, I usually tell my students that climate change is irreversible, but we can all contribute to delay for the worst. Right. You see what I mean? So it's an interesting way of providing the information, because a lot of times the students, especially now, are really exposed to their social media. Probably a lot of them are watching TikTok videos, and they're seeing different things. But a lot of the stuff they're seeing has a political bend to it, has an economical bend, has sort of pieces that are flowing around. And I think it's really important to have them talk about it, bring the ideas up, and then go research it and find out for themselves. So thank you, Rolando, for sharing. Did you want to say anything else about that? If you wanted to turn your microphone on? No. Denise, I see need to be careful not to disengage students, and I'd be worried about demotivating students as we're doomed anyway. And you know what, Denise, really good point, okay? And this is where I would go back and I would say, this is one example of a video that I've used, but it's not like I'm doing this, in the first couple of weeks of school. You have to know your students, right? You have to get to know your learners. So whatever media text or whatever text that you engage your students in is going to be, exactly. I completely agree. Denise has said a good counterpoint video to match it with. And again, there's so many resources you can do. But at the same time, here's a question to you, Denise. Can you see why I would have used this video with like older students to sort of spark that debate a little bit? Yes, no, maybe. Oh, don't worry, Rolando. It's okay. As long as you can see us. Yeah, exactly. And you see, and that's the one thing that I really like to do is to spark some type of discussion where we're not providing the students with the answers to everything, but we're providing them with discussion points, providing them with opportunities to debate. And Peter just put something in the chat, which is interesting, about having students research each political party's policy on the environment and leading up to the upcoming election. Because what's interesting, Peter, is how sort of in the junior grades, kind of like grade 5, when there's an election coming up, you study elections, you try to do it at the same time. I taught grade 5. I've done that before, but I like that idea. Again, it's sparking those ideas beyond just the semantics and the foundational knowledge. So here are some other student examples about some of their answers to stuff. How have living organisms been affected? Decreasing life expectancy, habitat destruction, droughts and storms, sea levels rising. Scientific community. This is actually the same student that talked about the double talk. Scientific community agrees that human actions are causing climate change. But again, is humanity the problem? And of course, the student was quoting the AGU, American Geophysical Union. Human-induced climate change requires urgent action, and humanity is the major influence of the global climate change. I see Ronaldo has put in the chat, students have to realize that we have to own our own actions as well. And I think Denise, a good idea, probably back to Peter's. So again, I want you to notice that even right now, all of us here, we're having emotional reactions, we're having opinions, we're having discussion about stuff. This is why I chose the video, right? To have something that you question and you want to know more and that everybody has an opinion on, which I think is great. This is, again, a question that I asked the students in terms of what is the word doomsday pending. And you can see here that one student, again, it's the same student. I love these responses. To me, doomsday pending is an eye-catching phrase meant to spark fear in an audience to draw attention. Nothing more to this, right? Nothing more than this, right? And then I have another student who's talking about, don't waste your time in trying to reverse climate change, but instead of focus on ways to survive the inevitable, right? And then another student who was, I think, talking about Greta Thunberg at the end, especially former president, I'm not going to say his name, sending hurtful comments to Greta in terms of, talking down about climate change. So, again, what kind of stuff are our students exposed to? And then what can you do as the educator to engage them in different types of material to engage that thinking, to activate that thinking, okay? And then from this point, they start to get excited. Okay, I really want to look at this. Peter talked about the solar panels. We talked about political parties. We talked about showing sort of the different on the balance scale in terms of opinion. So now, what do students do with it, right? And the next part. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this one. Again, what's your opinion on the Gaia Theory? And you can see here that students were talking about, an independent scientist. What is sort of the interesting factor about that? And the interesting thing about what they liked is that independent scientist funds himself, so doesn't have to report to a political body or an academic body, and so can sort of control the own research there. So thinking about this, when I started the engagement with the students, I went through some of these kind of media texts. And because I'm an elementary teacher, being able to have the other academic subjects, I could incorporate this into, maybe social studies, maybe history or geography, into language, the arts and stuff. And so I engaged them into different types of exposures and different engagements of stuff. And then from that, there was so much interest that we turned it into a project. Chidi said, we're responsible for climate change. Relentless advocacy is required. Excellent. I mean, it's a great point. And, it's so interesting because what you are all putting in the chat is basically what we get with the students. And it's the same kind of idea here. So the project that I'm going to talk to you about sort of involves 4 different kind of sections to it. One would be a proposal. One would be a presentation, some type of poster board, could be physical, could be virtual, whatever, and then some type of reflection. And the presentation and or poster board, I usually ask the students to create some type of interactive exhibit, interactive display, so that it's not just about throwing a slideshow on behind and having the students present. It's more about engaging people in some type of activity. So you can see here, it sort of talks a little bit about demonstrations, reasoning for your thinking and stuff. So here's a short video that goes over one idea of how you could do a project like this. And I want to just reemphasize that even though, and I said this earlier, that it says grade 8 a lot, it's because when I created the resource, when I co-created the resource, it was based on grade 8, but again, it could be adapted for any grade.
The second involves introducing the main components of the project, which consist of the proposal, the presentation, the poster board, and the reflection. Students will be using their experience with thick and open questioning from the previous lesson to come up with a research topic related to environmental sustainability. There is a suggested time for each component. However, teachers can use their own discretion based on the needs of their class.
The proposal is a group assignment that must be completed before the creation of a hands-on activity and poster board. Think of this as a blueprint of what the overall project will look like, and it should contain general information about the activity, the environmental issue, and its impact on the sustainability of water resources, either locally or globally. Once the teacher has approved and evaluated the proposal, the group may move on.
The presentation is a demonstration of their activity that supports and promotes their environmental issue in an interactive way. The poster component is a physical representation of the research. Please note that this resource discusses a physical poster board, but that other forms may be used, such as digital slideshows, websites, interactive whiteboards, three-dimensional models, etc.
The personal reflection piece is the individual assessment component of this project. Students are required to discuss their successes and challenges related to the planning and creation of the project and or hands-on activity, as well as their individual learning through this process.
So if you look at the next few slides, it goes over again the requirements there. Now, I will let you know that I have not updated the expectations as yet because we just have a new science curriculum that's just been released. But again, these are all Word documents, and I will say that I will be adapting this as I also explore the new curriculum. But you could download it and you could sort of use what you want. And again, it's not just for grade 8. I've used this with grade 4 up to grade 8, and I've even had teachers use this with the primary, and in a little more adapted, modified way for kindergarten students. But the overall idea here is to have the students work in groups, create a proposal, a written proposal, and of course, even though they create a proposal, their ideas might change, but it also allows for the teacher to have check-in points of assessment and check-in points to discuss stuff with the students. So that way they're not overwhelmed with sort of the enormity of potential project. The presentation, as was mentioned, it's more of a demo and potentially like an eco fair as opposed to a traditional presentation standing in front of the class with some type of slideshow. I always like to have an individual portion. Personal reflection is always nice to have. If you're like me and you also have language on your timetable, you can always incorporate this into a language assignment as well. So that is sort of the pieces of the project. And so 6 years ago, when we started this, and it actually became an annual fair every year for 5 years at 5 different schools. And it got to be my school twice because I had transferred schools in those 5 years. We created and when I say we, it's like myself and the students, we created an eco event, eco fair. And so the student projects were displayed, whether it was inside or outside, depending on the weather. The students' projects were all displayed, and each of them had some type of interactive piece of it where people could come up and talk about environmental issue and explore it. And just to give you some examples, I had a group that wanted to talk about how to sort recycling properly because they were very concerned that they sometimes see at school, or they're concerned about the garbage or recycling pickup at their homes, on the street, that is stuff really being divided up. And so the students wanted to create something that would be interactive. So they had objects that had metal on them and some objects that didn't have metal on them. And they created like a fishing rod out of a meter stick or out of a stick they found. And so, if it was magnetic, that would have been sort of the recycled materials. I think that was what it was. I had another group that was interested in looking at polluted water. And what does that mean for our local streams and ponds and lakes and stuff? And so grade 7 at the time. And so I was able to sort of work with them, and they were interested in sort of the acidity. And what they did was that they had a bunch of dirty water, and they had pH paper, and they measured the pH. And then what they did was they had filtering type materials. So they have rocks and mesh and other stuff. And the idea was to try to make the water cleaner. And again, it took just a few minutes and they were doing it. Some kids created a quiz board. Some students created other types of like an interactive project where there might have been some physical activity. But again, it wasn't just about, here's the project, here's my presentation. It was, here's my project, let's talk about it, and let's have you engage in something. Now, what we also did and it got bigger every year, we engaged community partners. So we engaged different organizational groups that were environmentally friendly, that were environmental organizations. They came in and they had interactive booths as well. And the students got to sort of experience it. And then what we did was we had the students throughout the course of the day, the students at the school got to explore the eco fair. And then in the evening, we invited educators from other schools to come, and they had an eco fair that they could also explore. And then there were also some, PD presentations that were offered as well. Now, that's a lot, okay? That's what I did. You don't have to do that. Okay. And really, the only reason that we did that is because that's what the students wanted to do. So we tried to make it work. Okay. What's the next slide? Okay. Here is a video from, I think this is from our second year. that we did the eco fair, and you'll see kind of what it looks like. It's very short.
As an extra feature to this project, we had the opportunity to expose the students' projects to a further audience by organizing a large-scale eco-fair. This motivated the students to further develop their demonstrations and hands-on activities so that it would be more accessible to a wider audience. For our eco event, which was called Building Nature Connection,
where does tissue go? I think it goes in the garbage, definitely.
students from the entire school, neighboring schools, and members of the community were invited to attend. We also were able to contact environmental organizations to take part in having interactive booths side by side with the students' projects.
We have our dirt, we have our soil.
Professor Steven, please tell us.
Okay, so it's true that for medicine things, mostly everything comes from trees, so there's this stuff.
By doing so, the students' own research became more relevant and provided them with a greater purpose to their environmental issue.
So the eco fair almost became like a school community fair, and each school sort of latched onto it a bit differently. The other part about this is that it takes some time funding, right, to do something like this. And there are a variety of places where you can reach out to that could also provide you with some funding. A lot of the stuff that you see and I've talked about, we got for free, or we were able to go through maybe school council, or there was some science or budget or some type of other budget in the school. But there also were times that we wanted to reach out to different organizations in terms of getting some more information about trying to get some funding. So one of the organizations, apologies, there we go. One of the organizations that we partner with was Learning for a Sustainable Future, LSF. And I have a longer video clip here. We'll watch just a few minutes of it, but you should be able to have access to this video clip through the slides. And then there are a few slides that I can show you. And I can tell you that this is one such organization that if you apply to some type of inquiry-based action project, you could get $100, $200, and you could get some certain resources that could work for your students or for your school or for your eco team. Now, before I play the video, I've done a little bit of talking, maybe a lot of talking. I just want to just do a quick check-in and just see if everyone's doing okay, if there are any questions. I know that there was a question about the slides. And yes, all this stuff is included and you should have access to it. If you don't, email Peter or myself, and we'll make sure that we get you access to these as well. Any questions?
At the end of the presentation, I'm going to be dropping a link into the OTF YouTube channel. And I've noticed, I just went there and just to confirm that all the notes that I send to OTF at the end of this, including notes from the chat window and all the relevant links, those notes and the links get included in the comments or in the description area of the video.
That's great. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Oh, Denise, you got $500 from LSF. That's great. So you know what I'm talking about, right? That's amazing. All right, let's watch a little bit and then I'll move on. Okay, here we go.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much to Mike for carving out a little bit of time in his presentation to allow me to come on and share some of LSF's programs and the different ways that we can support you. So if you haven't heard of LSF before, Learning for a Sustainable Future is a Canadian charity that has been around since 1991. We are national, we work across the country, we work in both languages, and we exist to support teachers in taking on this kind of learning that Mike is talking about. We want to support teachers in incorporating sustainability concepts and practices into their teaching across every grade, across every subject, every day. So we have a number of programs that help support us in this. The first of which that I want to share with you is Resources for Rethinking, or R for R database. So this was a project that we came up with in response to what teachers were calling the kit and run syndrome. So organizations would come to teachers and say, we have this great kit, you're gonna love it, see you never. And it would sort of gather dust on the shelf because there was no context, there was no quality control, there was nothing that could help teachers actually use the resources that they were being provided. So we created R4R. So this is a database that is 100% free to access, and it has over 1,400 resources on there. And we have many different kinds of resources. We have lesson plans, we have children's books, we have videos, outdoor activities, and we've recently added a new category for things like apps, games, websites, and other. The database is fully searchable. So we have an English side of the site and a French side. And you can put in the province that you're in, so the curriculum that you're dealing with, the grade or grades that you're teaching, the subject that you're teaching, all the way down to the unit in some cases. And you can search through a great list of sustainability themes that we've put together. And we've recently added the ability to search by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as well. And then best of all, every single resource on the site has been reviewed by somebody who either is or was a classroom teacher, so they know what they're talking about, and they have been connected to curriculum in all the provinces and territories. So I would love to show you around the site a little bit. So this is what it looks like.
So I'm going to pause it there just for being mindful of time. And the video, you can fully access the video through the link later. And I'll let you do that on your own. Samantha is great. And I've worked with LSF for a while, and they always have some great stuff here. Okay, Rolando, I didn't know it was blocked there, but yeah, thank you for putting that in there. One thing that's really interesting, and there are a large variety, there's other organizations, but they have stuff on their website that makes stuff really accessible to teachers. And not only is it, searchable activities and resources, but they also have different programs that exist. They have youth programs, they have action project stuff, and you can actually take a look at some of their links here. And I'm just going to go through this a little bit quickly. Here is some other stuff, which, and I apologize that the whole thing is not showing up on your screen at the moment, but they do have funding available. Now, here's the thing. It's paperwork, but you know what? It's well worth it. And Denise mentioned earlier that her school was able to get $500 from LSF. Even if you get $100, even if you get $50, you can do a lot with it. As well, Denise has mentioned LSF, they run some great PD sessions. I did more of the in-person ones more than 2 years ago, but they do have lots of great stuff. And so if you're looking for some ideas to how to fund projects that you're doing, reach out, do the paperwork. I mean, the fact that you're all showing up here after school time, it's like we're talking to everybody who's within the same kind of mindset. Denise, you are correct. I agree with you again. A lot of local stores. I haven't used Canadian Tire before, but I have heard. The other one that I've had success with is reaching out to Dollarama and getting a $50 gift card. And $50 at Dollarama for school projects, we know, right? As teachers, you can stretch that out. It can go a long way. So those are some of the ideas there, and you can actually go through, and if you wanted to contact LSF for anything that goes along there. Just pulling us back to the project here, this is sort of an overall kind of idea of how you could organize something like this. I usually do it as a class project, but some schools do it as their eco team project. And really, this is just suggested ideas and stuff that has been successful with myself. But you know your own students, and you know how to kind of engage them and what works and what will sort of grab their attention. There, I have a video, but I'm going to show that after, so I'll come back to this here. Azima, you asked how to apply for the grants to have a pollinator garden. So I think, Denise, if not mistaken, you probably would have applied through on the action project side. Is that correct? Through LSF? Because usually that's what you would do. And I'll tell you what, if your application focused on climate change, what I would recommend everybody is go check out their website. And if you would like, you'll have my email. It's on the presentation here. Feel free to reach out to me after the presentation and I can connect you directly to my contact at LSF and they can guide you to the website location for it. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, here is a video from, I think this was the 4th Eco Fair that we did. And we engaged, you'll see a picture here. We engaged, his name is Duckman, TK Duckman. He's a busker musician from Japan and he was in Toronto for a few years. And we did an upcycle project with my students. They collected stuff from thrift stores and consignment stores and we made bucket drums. So here's another video of what another eco fair could look like. Believe it or not, the music and the video editing and stuff was done by former students who are now, past university, college, and stuff. But really, what it's about is it's about really getting students to be excited about something. And most of what you saw in those videos were all with donations or funding to pull it all together. And it's a mess. There's a lot of work that's done into this. Learning is messy, but at the end of the day, they remember something, right? And they get engaged in something. So just being mindful of the time. I've got another quick video. I think it's like a minute, and then we're going to head off, and I'll be finishing the presentation. This is the short one. Okay. I see that Michelle has asked just to sort of go back here you wanted to see the timeline, I'll leave that up. All this stuff is available through the slide presentation. I know that it was quick. Again, the purpose behind this was to share some success stories, some ideas. And to be honest, I love to connect with people. My Twitter handle, I'll put in the chat. Feel free to connect with me and tell me some of your successes and stuff. And if there's anything that I can do to help support you in any way with some of these projects and stuff, that would be great. So that's the end of the presentation, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll send it back to Peter.
Okay, I'll just share my screen again. So thanks so much, Michael. That was very interesting. That was very interesting. You know, the environment is such a big deal nowadays. I'm not sure it's all about doomsday. You know, I think if we do our part, we can reverse it, but yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, thanks so much. Very interesting. And thank you so much to everyone for coming. I believe, did I drop some links in? Yes, I did. I dropped the links into the YouTube channel and also to the OTF PD calendar. So if you're not aware of the PD calendar, it's a good central place to go if you're looking for an AQ or an ABQ to take. And those usually filled in at least a month before the courses start. So it's a good central spot to find the courses, qualification courses. I also dropped in the link to the evaluation form. So I would encourage you to maybe fill in the evaluation form before you leave tonight. You will also be sent an email with the form in it as well. And so there again is the link, but like I mentioned, it's in the chat window.
Some great comments. Kathy, thank you. Best part of my Thursday. Best part of my Thursday, by the way.
Nice. And then lastly, just a reminder, this is number 5, I believe, of around 10 webinars. The next one is coming up on Tuesday, called Inquiry-Based Learning with Practical Lessons Using GIS in the Geography Indoor and Outdoor Classroom. I'm actually quite interested in that. I'm a bit of a computer nerd, so I want to see how computers are used in the geography class. And of course, you all know how to get there. You could just do a Google search for OTF Connects and then have a look at the calendar. So thank you so much, everyone. And with that, our webinar is complete.
Thanks, everybody.